and recording.
Right. Welcome everyone to another Tutorial Tuesday. We'll give a few minutes for people to sign on and hello, see some familiar faces. It's fun. Ooh, Gwen, what are you holding up? Oh, we can't hear you. You can unmute if you want. Well, we are gonna do, can't hear yet, but we've got, I see a couple more people coming in, so we'll give it a little bit more, and then we're gonna dive into brioche.
Hope and feathers.
Oh, hope and feathers,
Oh,
yay!
yay, I love
That's
it.
beautiful. You already finished? When did you start that?
Done.
Wow.
It's beautiful and I love it.
Awesome. Yay.
And now I'll mute.
And then we'll get started soon. So yeah, welcome everyone. This is Tutorial Tuesday, and today we're gonna just go over a little bit of brioche, which is a pretty big subject. So we're just gonna touch on basics and get to any questions. And yeah, we have a couple pattern suggestions for your first brioche and more complicated ones too. But hi, my name is Suzanne Nielsen, and thank you for coming to our brioche Tutorial Tuesday with Zen Yarn Garden. And yeah, we're just going to get started. So a couple of things I just wanted to show you in my hands. We're going to be switching back and forth between my face and my hands. So this is my hands. And here I have a brioche pattern. This is called the Make Waves Cowl. And it's very simple brioche. It's 2-color brioche in the round, and with a little bit of what's called syncopated brioche. And I'll just touch on that briefly. It also has, maybe we can go back to my face for a second, a cute cozy that's included in the pattern. And this cozy is a good way to just practice because it's very small. And you get to learn the technique before jumping into the bigger cowl project. So I'm going to show you a little bit of this cozy in kind of the demo that we're doing. But like I said, the easiest way, what I always recommend for people starting brioche, is to choose a project that is 2 colors and in the round. And I know that sounds harder, but with brioche, you'll see how that actually helps you keep track of things a little bit better. And it also, when you're in the round, you're always on the right side of your knitting. So that makes it a little easier, less complicated. But yeah, we'll show you some other things. So another thing that I always like to do is, I'm showing you my cast on here for what the sample I'm gonna work on. I like just a simple rolled edge with brioche. I've tried several other, cast ons and edges, and oftentimes I just really like that rolled edge. So that's what's in this pattern, and that's what I'm going to show you here. So we can go back to hands, and this is just 4 rows of stockinette knitting. So I just, knit purled for 4 rows because I'm doing this one flat. And then we're going to get into brioche. So for brioche knitting, there's really three different unique symbols that you need to know. And the first is called a brioche knit stitch. And then there's a brioche purl stitch. So we call that, it's denoted BRK, which is brioche knit stitch. And we call that like a bark. And then there's a brioche purl stitch. And sometimes people refer to that as a burp. So we're going to be burping and barking. And then also there's a stitch called a slip one yarn over. And that's the critical one. And that's the one that we're going to start out with, because this first row is like our setup row. And so I'm going to just jump in here. So for a setup row, we're just going to do a knit one stitch followed by that slip one yarn over. And we're going to show both throwing and picking. I'm going to start with picking, and then Nick might show us some throwing, and I'll also probably, but we start with knitting. So we knit 1 stitch, and then we're going to do this slip 1 yarn over. The key with the slip 1 yarn over is that we don't want, well, I'll just show it to you first. So you always bring the yarn to the front and then slip the stitch purlwise, and then bring the yarn back over the needle. And it's different than a yarn over because we want that slip 1 to straddle the stitch that we're slipping. Sorry, we want the yarn over to straddle the stitch that we're slipping. So we're going to do a couple of these, so I'll show you. So we'll do a knit 1, and then we're going to do that slip 1 yarn over. But for the slip 1 yarn over, we always bring the yarn to the front, slip the stitch, and then have the yarn go over. If you always remember to bring the yarn to the front, then when you're purling, it will still work out right. So knit 1, then the slip 1 yarn over, bring the yarn to the front, slip 1, give it a yarn over. And I'm going to try and throw this one. And if it looks too crazy, then Nick has she'll show us on a 1 color sample too. So we'll go ahead and knit 1, and then bring our yarn to the front, slip 1, and then just yarn back over the top. So then knit 1, and then bring the yarn to the front, slip 1, and back over. Knit 1, and then I'm going to show you what this looks like after. So I'm going to go back to my other way. So bring the yarn to the front, slip 1, yarn over, knit 1, slip 1, yarn over. And as you get better, you can really just bring the yarn to the front and then slip it together like that. See how that kind of created the yarn over as I was doing it? So yes, and I just saw the question. So the setup row is often with the 2nd color. It doesn't have to be, but I like it because it's easier to tell what's going on. So knit 1, and then this last stitch is a slip 1 with a yarn over. All right, and then next, I'm going to do something that's maybe a little crazy, but remember that I think the easiest way is to do 2-color brioche in the round. So with this sample, I'm using double pointed needles. So I'm going to pretend that I'm working in the round. And that means I can just like slip my stitches to the back. And then I'm just going to start with my next color. So when you're working 2-color brioche in the round, you always just switch colors every round. So you'll do 1 round with the light color, 1 round with the dark color. And that kind of counts as, you know, each of those rounds, you could count them as a half a round. But we can do that, or I mean, we can also switch, but so you'll go back. And also when you're doing 2-color brioche flat, you'll do this where you'll like knit across and then you can go back and get your other color. So I'm coming back now and I'm showing my other color. So now on this one, I'm going to be showing the brioche knit stitch, the BRK and the B, just the brioche knit stitch. So on this one, I'm going to be, what a brioche knit stitch is where you knit the yarn over that we did previously together with the stitch that's there. So I kind of spread out my knitting. It kind of looks a little crazy, I know. But you can see I have a stitch with this, the yarn over is over across the top of that stitch. So I think it'll make a little more sense if we get going. So in this one, I'm always going to be knitting, or doing the brioche knit stitch to the ones that have an extra yarn over with them. And the ones that are just all by themselves, I'm going to be slipping and giving those the yarn over. So again, I'm going to bring the yarn to the front and I'll slip this stitch because this is the first, it's all by itself stitch, and it's called the slip one yarn over. So I slipped it, give it a yarn over. Now here's where I'm going to do the brioche knit stitch. And the brioche knit stitch is just knitting the yarn over together with the stitch itself. So I knit those two together. Then I have a one all by itself, and I want to give it a yarn over basically. So I bring it to the front, slip it, and do the yarn over, and then knit this together, brioche knit stitch. All right, so slip one, yarn over, knit one, slip one, yarn over, and then do the brioche knit. And I'll switch back to kind of show. So bring this to the front, slip one, and then just comes over for the knit two together. So you can see how I'm just, the yarn over is straddling the stitch, and it's very easy to just knit those two together. Now, if you accidentally put your yarn over in front of your stitch, you'll notice it, and that's where it'll be hard. But okay, so bring it to the front to do a slip one and then yarn over, and then knit those two together for the brioche knit stitch. All right, bring it to the front, slip one, and then we'll go into the brioche knit stitch. And see how you don't actually have to like bring it back over. Just bringing it to the front kind of automatically creates that yarn over. So bring it to the front and slip the stitch. It's kind of automatically created, and we can just go into the knit, knit those two together. Right to the front. All right, here we have our edge stitch. So I just kind of make sure that I still have this yarn over that's hanging out, and I'll knit those two together. All right, so that is just the basic brioche knit stitch. And you can see that things just look a little crazy, but that's normal. I'm gonna show my swatch here. So this is a 2-color brioche in the round. And you can see that the row that you're working on looks a little crazy. But below it looks nice and even like a squishy brioche stitch. So in this sample, you can see here that you have this yarn over that's straddling a stitch and then a stitch by itself. So you always have that it's, in like ribbing in that sense.
It's pretty obvious in single color brioche as well.
Yeah, so you'll be able to see that yarn over, and where you see the yarn over is the one that you want to knit those two together. Yes.
So you've got the single stitch and then the wrapped stitch beside it.
Yes.
They're quite obvious.
So yeah. And then I'm going to show my next row. I'm going to just pretend like I was working in the round. And so my yarns would have been like worked around and be ending up back here, so that I can show you the brioche purl stitches. So now I'm going to use the, I just finished using the dark color. Now I'm going to go back to the light color. And with the light color, we're going to do the brioche purl stitch. So anytime I see the yarn over on top of a stitch, I'm going to do the brioche purl stitch. So I'll bring this yarn to the front like I'm purling. Let's see here. Bring it to the front like I'm purling. And then I'm going to purl these two together instead of knitting them together. So that's the brioche purl stitch. And then I have a stitch all by its lonesome, which happens to be the opposite color. So I'm going to slip that stitch and give it a yarn over. So my yarn is already to the front. Remember I said before, we always make sure our yarn is to the front, so I can go ahead and just slip it and then give it a yarn over. And then here I have the two stitches together. I have a stitch with the yarn over it. And so for that, then I'll just go ahead and purl those two together. My yarn's already in the front, slip the stitch and give it a yarn over. And then we'll purl those together, slip it, yarn over. Purl those two together, slip it, yarn over. Okay, now I'll try and do it throwing. So I just slipped it, yarn over, so I'm going to do a purl. I'm very slow purling, but purl this stitch. And then my yarn's to the front, so I'll slip it. And here I have to really give it a yarn over. And then purl those two together. Now slip and yarn over. And purl them together. So brioche, you're always going to be alternating between this slipping one, yarn over, and doing a brioche knit stitch or a purl stitch.
It is worth noting, if you do want to start with a single color brioche to go back and forth, when you're working back and forth, you're always working a bark. So if you want to get the bark down first, go back and forth.
That's a good way to start it.
In one color.
Yes. So it still looks a little bit crazy, but that's just the nature of brioche. So that's another thing to remember, is just kind of give yourself a few rows to get going until you see really that it looks nice. Yes, and we're going to take a short break and let that settle a little bit. Let some questions. I see some questions, but I didn't get to read the questions yet, so we'll do that. But we have just a couple patterns and a special coupon code for our Tutorial Tuesday, of course. And the discount code is Brioche, and that gets you 20% off of the whole Zen Yarn Garden website. So, you know, it works on everything. So the kits and everything we're going to show. So this is the Make Waves cowl. And we do have kits for that up on the website. And like I said, it does come with a pattern for the cozy and the cowl. And it's a good, nice beginner stitch. It is one that I designed. So my email is on the pattern. So if you ever have questions or anything, you could feel free to email me. We do also have, there's tutorial videos that are specific to this pattern that are in the pattern. So, and this session is being recorded. I know brioche, there's a lot to brioche, and it's a little hard to squeeze it all into a half an hour, but I'll try to get to questions and make things a little bit more clear coming up. But we also have this beautiful pattern, which is called Soul Queen. And this has a lot of brioche in it. You can see you get some just simple back and forth 2-color brioche with some, you know, a little bit of interesting lace in between. And then towards the end, you get a little bit more complicated where you're doing some decreasing and increasing with brioche. And so I'll talk just a tiny bit about that. Let's see, what questions, Nick, have you been following some of the questions? Should I get to any of those first? Or
we had Maureen who had a question, if brioche feels or looks much different from a double fisherman's rib. Maureen, it actually looks very, very similar. It's just the way that you're knitting it that's different.
Yeah.
But
so with double fisherman's
is actually the same.
Yeah, like it comes out the same, because imagine with fisherman's rib, you're knitting one below. Mm-hmm. So you're just knitting below instead of giving the stitch the yarn over. So
you're creating the yarn over by knitting in the stitch below.
Right.
Because the stitch that's on the needle actually falls and becomes that yarn over that you've done.
So it ends up being about the same.
It's just the way that it's done that's different.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Were there other questions? Yeah, brioche is one of those hard ones to fix unless you've really got a grasp of what's going on. But it is, I don't know, it's a unique, it's a beautiful, like squishy fabric, and worth like trying a few times. So keep at it. But I'll show one more round on my little sample, and then just to show how it'll start to look. I don't know.
We had a question from Gail. When first starting brioche, is it easier to start with 2 colors so you can see the different stitches? We are
I think
different minds
so.
on this one.
I know. Okay. Anik doesn't think so, but I think so. The reason, I'll tell you the reason I think so, and then Anik will talk about the reason she thinks so, and then you'll have to decide for yourself whether you think one will be easier.
Yeah.
The reason I think it's easier is because it's much clearer to see like the columns that you're working on. I also think it's more like visually impactful to most people. When they think of brioche, they think of 2 colors. So that's like what they're wanting to do. So I think so, but I can see Anik's point too, how it is easier with just 1 color. You don't have like 2 balls of yarn to worry about. And it is pretty easy to see when you have this yarn over stitch. When I've seen people get hung up is that it is hard to, oftentimes, let me see if I can show this in a sample. But you really, you need that yarn over to be over the top of a stitch. And what happens is a lot of times people they don't bring the yarn to the front first and then slip it. And then you end up with a yarn over in between your stitches. And if you're only with 1 color, then it's really hard to like figure out what you did wrong. But with 2 color, it's pretty easy to see, oh, I made a yarn over in between instead of over the top of the stitch that it should have been over the top of. So that's one, but yeah, so you just have to decide. I think the best way probably is to find a pattern that you like and start in that one. So if you like a single 1 color scarf because you just like the real squishy bigness of it, then start with that. If you like the visual impact of the 2 color brioche, then I'd say go for it. Any other thoughts on that, Anik?
Well, I mean, I'm a proponent of everyone learns differently.
Yes.
But if you do have a 1 color brioche, I'm just going to go to my hands. If you do have a 1 color brioche, the columns are very obvious as well. It's also very obvious when you switch from a bark to a burp. Mm-hmm. So here, this is what we call syncopated brioche, which is what Suzanne has in the middle of her Making Waves cowl. Hers is just 2 colors. Mine is 1 color. So you can see that clearly that the pearls become knits. Mm-hmm. So it really is a question of how do you learn? What works best for you? This little sample, granted, I'm familiar with the technique, but this little sample barely took me 20 minutes. So it's a great way to learn how to do the bark and become comfortable with that method. Mm-hmm. Then you can switch to burp, practice that, and half an hour later, you're ready to start basically any project because you're familiar with both. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's my opinion. But yes, 2 colors can be visually more easy to spot. Mm-hmm. I just find that you automatically and right away have to be comfortable with both burp and bark. And it can be confusing. Yeah. That can be confusing. My personal experience as a teacher has been that it has been easier with 1 color, but
I know, and my personal
everyone learns differently.
Yeah,
everyone learns differently. So it's really a question of what works for you.
Yeah. So you can choose. All right, I'm going to show just one more little, sample thing, and give you guys a chance to think of some more questions, and then I'm going to show a little bit of like what happens when you are decreasing or increasing in brioche. so that you can do like, I think a lot of the really visual stunning brioche projects out there, they use that increasing and decreasing, and it looks amazing, but it is a little intimidating. All right, so now we're on a row where I'm using the darker color, and I am going to be knitting. So I'm going to be doing the brioche knit stitches. So I'll start with, this one is a lonely stitch by itself, so I know I need to give it a yarn over basically. So I bring my yarn to the front and slip it and give it a yarn over. And then I can see here that I have the darker color that's on the needle with a lighter color hood. I guess sometimes people refer to these yarn overs as a hood. And then we'll knit that together. So bring the yarn to the front and slip it with the yarn over. It really, I'm gonna knit this a little bit more like just how I would knit it. And you'll see that you do really develop a rhythm once you concentrate really on the technique of bringing the yarn to the front, slipping the stitch and yarning over, and then doing a knit stitch. But it gets into a rhythm. And yeah, let's see. I'll finish this row up and then we'll see how it's starting to come together a little bit more. So I didn't concentrate on my edge stitches here. But you can see here. So now at least you can see a little bit that I have this like dark color column. And what happens in brioche is when you are doing a bark stitch, it makes the knit stitches always pop forward. So the bark stitches pop forward and the brioche purl stitches, they recess back. So you can see here, these are the knit stitches, and then in this trough is where the brioche purl stitches are. So it's like you always have like a knit, purl, but with the syncopated brioche, like Nick was talking about, you're always like have these columns. So in this column, I was doing a brioche knit stitch and it popped forward. But then if I still follow this up, it goes into a trough. And so what happened is that I just started purling that stitch to make this color recess. So in this column, this changed to a knit. Instead of down here, it was a purl. Now it changed to a brioche knit stitch, which made it pop forward. So that is all that is syncopated brioche. And I realized that this tutorial was it's a little hard to get all, you know, the idea of brioche across in just a little tutorial, but I hope that that gave you a little bit of a flavor of like how to, you know, just that there's only 3 different stitches in this brioche. There's three different stitches are just the brioche knit stitch, the brioche purl stitch, and the slip one yarn over stitch. And when you know that, then you can at least read a pattern. You can at least tackle the pattern and give it a try. And yeah, so this is my little sample in the round of just a little cozy. But I did want to show one. I'll probably do this on the hand. Sorry, I was talking for a little bit. But then when you are doing decreasing or increasing, you can imagine that there's a couple different ways. But usually, whenever you're increasing or decreasing, you're doing a double decrease. So you're turning 3 stitches, you're turning, you know, 3 stitches into just 1 stitch. So you're either taking these 3 stitches together. So a stitch, and then this is the one that has that yarn over with it, and another stitch, and those will all get put together so that you end up with just, you know, brioche is always alternating, right? You always have like the stitch with the yarn over and then a stitch by itself, stitch with the yarn over, stitch by itself. So if you decrease, if you do a double decrease, then you maintain that order, which is why, that's why it's really usually a double decrease or a double increase. So you might do a double increase, like this shawl has a good picture of that. So here, they're increasing like quite a few into the hole. And when you decrease, this one is all increasing. But when you decrease, you have those.
I actually have a decrease on my sample.
Oh yeah, do you want to show us? I think this one does too, actually, now that I'm seeing it, but
There's just a simple decrease.
yeah. So you can see how kind of 3 columns turned into 1 column. So she has like 2 troughs there and 1 kind of rib that sticks up, and that all 3 of those kind of turn just into 1 trough.
Yep. And then a single increase here.
Yes, and then increasing is the same. You kind of expand it into, 1 turns into 3.
Yeah. And on the other side, that's the increase, which just kind of pops out of nowhere. And the decrease just disappears into nothing. There we go.
Yeah. So anyway, I know that was a lot, but maybe we'll end up doing like a brioche class or something for an actual project, if people are interested. So do let us know if you're interested in that kind of a thing. And yeah, reach out for, I don't know, any last minute questions. Feel free to put it in the chat or even just ask your question. Margaret, I see you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I've done the straight brioche, single color and that. The problem I have is when now I'm doing it on magic loop in just 1 color, and
the brioche turn that you're, in the
so
round.
so when you turn it, and then like if it's a yarn over or if it's where do you put that yarn when you go around the corner?
Yeah, really, sometimes what I do is I just kind of turn the corner and then make sure that the yarn, if it's a stitch that needs that hood, make sure that, that stitch has the yarn over the top of it, after you've like adjusted your, for your magic loop, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Kind of, you could even just leave the yarn to the front, say, of your knitting, do your magic loop, and then you'll be able to see that the yarn has to come over that needle, as to make the next stitches so that it gets the hood.
Over it, okay.
Yeah, so you always just want to make sure, that you're alternating between a stitch that is just all by itself and a stitch that has a yarn over.
Even turning the corner and starting a new round?
So just pretend like the corner isn't there, kind of. So when you're visually inspecting what's going on. So, yes, you have this like loop out and you've turned a corner, but make sure that you're still following the every other stitch.
Okay.
And then that should
do it.
Help, maybe.
So you don't recommend making the beginning of your round in the center of your project and not on the ends?
I would.
Yeah, would you switch it to that? I haven't
doing
found that to
color
be as useful, because at some point you're still gonna run into that issue.
But I think you can
Unless you have
see
a
it.
section.
It's just visually, it's going to be easier if it's in the middle of your needle than if you're like if it's in the gap between your 2 needles.
Yeah.
Then it's
going
hard.
to be easier to see, at least to start, until you get familiar with the changing of the colors at that spot. Then you can switch it back.
Right. You can
Okay, so
But
start it. Okay, start it in the middle.
or
start it
even
that way.
just do it
Help
off by
yourself
like
out.
2 stitches. You don't have to like shift it completely to the middle, but if you just shift it by like 2 stitches, that could help.
Beginning of the round. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Oh,
that you
you,
can visually see it.
thank you for
Yeah.
answering that question. It's been 2 weeks and I've just been struggling with that
Aw.
thing.
Yeah.
There's got to be a better way.
Yeah, you could,
Okay, thank you.
and then once you get familiar, it'll be easier to see.
To
And you
see
can
it
even
turning
like,
and I'll know where those
yeah, at
things
the
go
end of the
end.
round, you'll say to yourself, oh goodness, there should have been a yarn over here. And it'll be easy to just kind of pick it up and fake it.
Yeah, the ends get so wampered. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's a Texas term. Excuse me.
Okay, I think we're over our time, but
Oh,
We
um,
are.
no, you're fine. But thank you so much for joining us. Remember, we do have the discount code, and yeah, let us know if we should do a more advanced brioche class, or even just a class on like the make waves pattern, or something like that to walk through together. It'll be fun.
And don't forget that the discount code is good for those grab bags on the website.
Oh yes, yes. I forgot to mention we have grab bags up. So
Grab bags. Grab
yes.
those.
Grab bags.
They're
And
awesome.
this pattern is in a fingering weight yarn. So it's brioche with fingering. Oh, one other thing I did want to mention, if we have a second before, was that most of the time with brioche, you kind of go down a needle size. So that's just something to keep in mind with, if you normally always use this size needle for fingering weight shawls, remember that you'll probably go down, or same with DK weight. The make waves is in a DK weight. But I think there's grab bags probably for both, maybe, at least for fingering, I know there are, but they might be good. Just, you can pick up a grab bag and use 2 contrasting colors from it for
did you make that cowl on Magic Loop?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I do both the cowl and the cozy on Magic Loop.
Magic Loop.
Yes.
Okay.
But you can do it, you can do it on, you could even, I don't know, make them flat and then change, but.
Oh no, I'm going to Magic Loop. I'm definitely
Go for Magic Loop.
one of these days. Gotta figure that out.
All right, thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, bye.
Thanks,
We'll see you
everyone.
next week.
Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.